Alright, the last 20 minutes of this video is going to be my reply back to comments, my back and forth, my exchange with Conference Report on this tool, which he is, thank God, taking an interest in and helping to provide. You need some sort of a dialectic to develop software, basically. And so I find that really useful because I've made all of this cloud of features and I've done all these prototypes and things, and now I know what I want to build. It's going to take years to build it, like 5 years, if I could work on it full time and have help, because you ramp up your goals and you could scale up certain stuff. And so there's this scoping when I say 5 years, it could be 10, it could be 2, it could be, but there's I'm going to use this time frame of like 5 years, and you need to set up a structured conversation to develop it. Now, in general, in business, you have a bunch of people, and it's obvious you need to do your methodology, your development methodology, which is a kind of a structured conversation. It's obvious that that's what you need to do, right? Because you've got a problem, and with people having to communicate well is already a present problem. But when you do software on your own, my projects, I usually find people that are interested in it, and I've learned because you still want to have a structured conversation, and you can have a structured conversation with yourself, but it's just not the same thing. You're kind of simulating a structured conversation, and it's not as efficient. You put energy into creating that structure. So inside, as an individual, I try to have sort of a rhythm, and the rhythm does the work for an individual of a structured conversation. The philosophical point I wanted to make, and especially conference support, I think I just kind of feel like this is where people get me wrong a lot. In the video, I'll mention a couple times about my basic inclinations, where I'm coming from on stuff. Like, I hate catchy, Night with an N-I-T-E product names, and obviously there's a reason people do this. So when I mention my inclination against those things, I'm not saying I want to find a way to stick with my basic inclinations. No, I'm a relativist, and it's all about there's this wide world in the universe. So when I say my basic instinct, usually if I put it that way, I'm talking about I want balance. So for example, my tendency is to loathe names like that. I like esoteric names. I'm the kind of guy, which is why these technology companies that are marketing to other technology people choose these weird names. Zybotron makes more sense to me than, the talking back to you tool or whatever. I don't even know how to do it. So, but I did make a suggestion. I'm going to change the name of the tool to my suggestion unless I have a better name, and then when I get a better name, I'll change it to that. It's very easy to change the name of the extension, and I haven't. That's why you have to use the link to go there. It is not released. This is for our review, but I want it to be an open process, so the review is open. And thank you for reviewing it. I really appreciate you installing it on all those platforms. That's great, and again, a long-term thing. But I've looked into this kind of stuff. I've done a little bit of smartphone development just as projects to see if I could do it, what's involved. And I don't want to develop apps that way, but we can do web pages, JavaScript apps, and that's coming. But like the browsers on the phones don't support the extensions and stuff, but there's ways to do it. There's ways to make apps with JavaScript HTML, and then have a system compile it onto Android and Apple and the Amazon phone or whatever, and do it at this high level, because all those platforms have browsers that can run it. So we're not relying on some commercial company to make that possible. But that's evolving right now. That's not here, so that's again something out in the distance. But the question of what do we name this thing? Oh, and it's very difficult too because I come up with words like structured conversation. This tool, if I was just going to work on it in some other context, we hadn't arrived at this context in which I do want to do it. It'd be like the structured conversation tool. And the fact that people don't get it, it's like, well, some people will. I'll just wait for the slower ramp up of people because it would be like a project of art. I want to build this thing, right? And uh, so structured conversation tool and these I love these kinds of names, you know. And when I look on the net, there's other developers doing things. That's what like data-driven documents. It makes these beautiful graphics. It's called data-driven documents, D3.js. That's how programmers tend to think. Not all of them, but the subculture that I'm sort of part of. The thing is, I like that it like in a direct sense, my aesthetics. But what I want in the world as universe is a balance, right? So if I tend to be too passive, I'd want something to balance and make me, to balance that. So in the end, I don't suffer the disadvantages of being too passive. If I'm aggro, I want the balance of that. And so in this naming, it's like I want an opportunity to compromise and name it, Jelly Talk or something. I don't know, like Twitter, to me, stupidest name. When I heard Twitter, the name gave me a bad attitude about it. I actually underestimated the type of communication and why it made sense to have people who are text messaging so much. Why wouldn't you just have text message to the world? It does make sense. And the name threw me off. And I still think they shouldn't be called tweets. Those are twits. Twitter, it's a twit. And it's a twitty kind of thing. And I still have a negative attitude about it. I mean, I could see why I thought it wouldn't go anywhere, and that it was because of my taste. And in making something that's going to go somewhere, I want to balance my taste out. I'm want to be in the recipe. It's like I'm garlic, and I'm not saying this isn't going to be a garlic dish. I'm just saying, let's have some fish or something too. Or for the vegans, sorry, let's have some tofu. Fuck that up now. So that's the basic point, is that I want to have a balance of different opinions. That's engineering. And on an emotional level, I apply that just as much as to anywhere else. I think a good group has these different tendencies, and if everybody could be like, well, here's how I am, and here's how far out that goes to, like, my space has to feel that way. But that can gradiate the dog. It usually does that if it's male. Into other people's little spaces that they have. Some people need a wider space and a narrow space. And then in between all of those space, where all the species, all of these circles are around like this because these people are working to each other. They have to be in contact. And then what's in that middle ground? What's that territory? That's, I think, where you create those are the artifacts of your group work. And so that space in between people is achieved by consciously balancing your ideas with those of other people to get something in between. So anyway, did you understand? The point is, when I talk about my preferences, or not my preferences, my innate tendencies in a context like this, I'm usually doing it because I'm saying I appreciate the balance, or I'm asking for a balance. I'm asking for a contrary view. It's like, okay, I don't like naming things in a marketable way, so this would be a good place to have somebody that does around, That's what I'm saying. And if, because when I have an innate tendency that I want to go full bore with, and I'm like, no, this is the way I want it, I'll say, this is the way I want it. Here's why. Here's where my value systems are. That's why it's on this side of the borderline of whether I'll compromise or not. And in coding, um, if you could communicate this, it's really useful, because I have a very in a code lab, you know, um, like my idealized coding lab would be a stratosphere jet that flies around, that can fly at the stratosphere, so that it can go to whatever time zone it wants. So we could program when we're at midnight, and then if it's like, well, it's time for midnight to be over, it would land, somewhere and have a day, you know, go to sleep, wake up and go back to midnight, more coding, and there's computers all over, and of course it's green, it flies with thorium, um, puts off no toxic chemicals, and it's like I can have that kind of metaphorically, not literally, damn, but I can have that kind of you know um, a habitat. I can have that kind of programming habitat, and the extension doesn't have to have that particular flavor, because this is where it's produced. Into a certain sense, it'll have a manufacturer style that goes with it as it goes out there, but most people won't even notice that, and that's part of the beauty of the art of programming. Is this, it's like architecture. It defines the space, and yet it melds into people's subconscious just naturally as they actually use it. It's like the most subtle form of art, where you don't have to get somebody to decide to go consume art. I'm going to go to the museum today. They just are getting their mail, and there's this artistic event for them, and also it's interactive, and software has this architecture kind of flavor of, there's a joy to seeing people use your work, and when they misuse it, that can be funny, but it can also be disappointing, but they never use it quite like you think. In a sense, you could almost argue they always misuse it, but I don't look at it that way, because I don't have any expectation really of how it's going to be used per se. I build stuff that I think is useful structurally. I feel I can see this potential that it has. It's like, look, this thing allows you to create this kind of data structure. With that data structure and the right and a particular attitude onto it, you can then use that to accomplish some goal that makes all of this a useful tool. You want something like that? Great, I got that covered. Making your catchy name, I really would like to have somebody to help me do that, and by help I mean do it instead of me. So, okay. Well, okay, I went off on a lot of tangents, but hello, this is a video to everybody in Conference Report. As Conference Report will probably know, I've left a comment in his video, and but I couldn't really see editing it. I thought it would probably take hours to edit it into some form of clarity, and I think I can just talk about the points and explain what I might have meant. So first of all, in terms of advanced usages, I think most of my, I work as a software engineer, but I have an artistic approach towards programming. I've done lots of just, if I was a trust fund baby, I'd just be writing interesting programs, things that were interesting, like I wrote a program that'll take 6 images and cut them up and put them on a piece of paper, so you can fold the piece of paper into an origami ball. I mentioned that before. That's the kind of thing I'm really into on my own. But I do know how to make tools that are of use to other people, and I take pride, and I do get enjoyment from creating tools, but that requires a workman, so that, to try my hammers out and whatnot. So that's the very useful role that you're playing from my point of view, though it's actually more broad than that, I think, the role you're adopting, and I'm glad that it's with an artistic person. For various reasons. So advanced users and the idea of being able to turn on and off advanced features. I totally agree. We will do things that way.
I think furthermore that we might even have a small family of extensions, because we can have it so that you add an extension and it changes the single interface. We can just have them complement each other, putting different controls on the page. Or, we can have, if we decide it's better, we can have checkboxes to say whether you want this or that mode, right? So we totally agree. As we tend to be agreeing, the issue is I've been working and thinking about this kind of software for 30 years, yeah, since I started programming and was a young teenager. And so, like, none of the ideas that we have discussed or that you asked, is this possible, um, are impossible, and few of them are things I haven't thought of, except for the important details of, there's maybe infinite ways to present a particular idea. I want to have a two-dimensional representation of a network of related videos. And, there's a lot of ways to present that. I've played around with doing it geographic maps, purely, graph theory type maps, and so on. And we have this ordering problem I'll get into in a bit. Um, I had a little trouble doing OAuth in the extension, so I ended up getting it working from my server-based client. I therefore now have an approach both of how I can get it working sort of the way I want in the extension, and I have a workaround that I can just force it to work. That'll be good enough, and that'll, the users might not even notice the difference. Um, so, um, so when I get back to work, I should be able to make progress on that. Now, names, it's funny, your reaction to the responder. Um, yeah, I'm not into being the one to choose the name. I get to name a lot of things as a programmer and the internal technologies, and I like esoteric names that are not the way marketing people would name things. And I even have sort of a negative reaction to certain kinds of names, like a chatterbox or something. Those are the kinds of names that I would not choose, but I also have this sense that that's the kind of name we do want. I agree with you. So in the spirit of that, I think I'm going to change the name the next time I go in there to backatcha. We'll call it that. The extension will be called backatcha, and that'll be our low bar to improve upon. Okay, I would like to adopt a name. I would take a name that you suggest. I would love if there was a community and we voted on the name. Whatever, I don't want to choose it. If it's just a one person has chosen an idea of a name, I just as soon go with someone else's. But I'm back at you. So that's the kind of name I would never choose. I mean, I chose it basically by thinking, what's a name I would never choose? Okay. Um, Regarding leaving traces of conversation or the artifacts of conversation, I've done a lot of prototyping in the last few years, okay? I've graphed whole response trees um, with like the response at the top and then the replies below it, with the thumbnails getting smaller and smaller as the tree gets deeper. I've done the other two-dimensional types of graphs. So I was just pointing out that, yeah, you could take a look at a thing called d3.js. I linked the samples in my comment to your video. It's a system called data-driven documents. There's some very beautiful visualizations in there it's a wonderful system. So for all sorts of things, but certainly I can imagine that I would like to make a force-directed graph linking related videos. So if you want to look at that, you might enjoy. There's some really beautiful work there in the examples for data-driven documents. On the editing and vandalism, editing, the response network or whatever, and vandalism. Um, that is something we have to do. It's potentially complicated. Editors mean interactivity. It's easier to create a pretty picture than let people edit it. Um, but I think one thing and I would like to bring up is one element of how Wikipedia manages to do so well against vandalism has to do with revision control. Every version of a document is stored. Basically, there's very smart revision control systems that developers use that for text files doesn't even waste space. When you check in a new version of a file, it's stored as a patch, as a difference between the now current version and the previous version. And systems like this make it easy to go back, and that helps us undo vandalism, and also to roll back edits that might have failed and become like vandalism and corrupted the data. So I think that's a part of it. I don't have this directly in my system, but it's some standard software engineering. So just something to think about. Um, in terms of the wider community, or using a community of YouTube developers, I'm very into that, and this is also where you can help me a lot, and other people can help me a lot. I would like to be doing development in response to uh, the goals of a community as the domain experts for this particular tool, and that means the community is a little bit other than me, something I can converse with, and so you and other people can help with that, finding that community when we have a tool, perhaps marketing ideas, what kinds of social media, maintaining the social media. If there's a Kickstarter, you kind of need to be communicating with that and marketing to some community that might want to help you kickstart, right? And that's not something I'm probably going to be good at doing, or just sort of inclined to spend my time, given that there's so much software work to do, and also just my general disposition, because we do seem to have this very compatible idea. A lot of the things I mention, you go, well, let's put that off, or let's do that this way. Things you've mentioned and ask, hey, is that possible? Yeah, they're things I've thought of. And the issue really is what I would call an ordering problem in development. Software can kind of be loosely viewed as an infinite number of trivial things that have to be done, and to do it in a finite time is largely an issue of prioritization. And as a sort of an artistic-minded coder, somebody that's in a context, a professional context, I rely a lot on the stated mission and goals, the sort of the philosophy of the tool that's being built. And so we need to simulate that through this community. And this is where just you, even as a single person, is very useful, to provide, to be that person at the other conversational point, trying to represent the user. But even more so, you or other people that might be able to actually gather that community and represent them, not just through imagination of what their position might be, but by actually communicating with the community that actually has their preferences one way or another. Um, so I want to bring what I've learned in my prototyping and in doing this hobby, and throughout the whole history of being interested in a product like this. And the problem there is that's a lot of things. Um, just a lot. Everything we've talked about and stuff we haven't even gotten into. So that's very useful. And having this kind of focus where I can go, geez, I have this arbitrary decision. Do I make this bold? Do I put it on that page? All of these things. You can spend a lot of time thinking about that. It's a lot easier for me if I have a community or a person representing a community that I can offload those kind of questions to. And the name of the tool is maybe a good example of that. It's important, the name, but I don't want to sit there spending 8, 10, 16 hours trying to figure out what the name is. I would rather have somebody else coming up with the name, and we just go with that. Of course, I'm a member of that community at that point. I might have a vote that I want to put in, but it would be not as the developer that's going to make a final decision, but rather the developer is one person on a team that thinks about that kind of thing. So finally, let me just say I'm basically in the middle of a 2-week break from coding. I'm working on a book. I'm writing a book that has a certain design to it. So, because I always write a lot, but I'm trying to put together certain ideas in a cohesive framework, and I'll be doing that for another week. Um, it would be great if we had some sort of a roadmap to a Kickstarter. I will continue to work on this, but I'm also ramping up, looking for paying work, and it would be great if this was something that I could just focus on 8 hours a day, which I have done in the last month, but I can't sustain that for months and months on end. Um, so to a certain degree, I would like to get a couple more versions out, with the authorization, for example, and with the beginning version of a user's page that's useful, but maybe not the final version, what you were calling the user's page. These other extension pages, and if we could get a Kickstarter going, it would be awesome. And that's something I don't see myself doing, um, for various reasons. So anyway, that's my feedback, and I I I think the next version of the tool will be a noticeable and interesting improvement. I'm thinking it should include the authorization in a user's page that sort of uses this new system to recognize that you're the person that owns this video. Um, I guess the final thing is, for all of these ideas, they can all be stored in the GitHub issue system. You can report bugs, enhancements, requests, all kinds of any kind of a note, really. They should all be relatable to potential to-dos on a to-do list, but they can be complex things that can't just be worked on directly, but need to be broken down into other sub-issues. Um, I don't know if that's a pain or easy or useful or whatever, but I thought I should mention that. Um, GitHub is designed to be sort of a community portal for developers, and to a lesser degree to users, kind of for expert or open source type users. So I don't know if that is a place that an actual community wants to use directly, and if not, maybe we should find something else. I certainly think getting a community of testers, ideally of people that would want to use this tool themselves, but also, possibly just people that, um, are interested in YouTube development and are willing to test. Either way. Uh, Yeah, and again, the ordering problem. Because see, from my point of view, I do think I am most attracted to the advanced tools, but I want to make a tool that is simple and usable the way you've described. So, if I was just doing this entirely on my own, I would probably be inclined to expand this to sites beyond YouTube. Now, we've already agreed we should focus on YouTube, and I agree. I'm just telling you, yes, I'm going to do that. That's my conscious, rational mind telling me, guiding how I should use my time. But I still have sort of an internal tendency, and to generalize or to add the time code thing. These are things that make sense to me on this logical analysis level of what I want the tool for, and I don't want to be left to my own devices. I want to build a tool that prioritizes things in order of their usefulness, in order of how likely they are to be used, and things like this. How much use some simple thing might actually have for people, and not go on to beautiful graphs, because I like creating software that creates beautiful graphs, things like that. We will get to that. I feel like all of the stuff that I want to do, we will get to, but I want this help ordering what we do first, right? Um, Furthermore, everything I'm making, is a toolkit. It'll allow people to make other versions of the extension. They'll be able to make different versions of this backatcha tool that still talk to the same back end and share the response data and just visualize it different ways. Again, that is something though that we should put off. I don't need to wrap this up as a development kit until we have a compelling extension / application built with it. These are things in the long run, literally over the next 5 years, that we have time to sort in. And so there's kind of like these, the thousands, imagine thousands of useful things we can do, individual things that we can do, and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of them. And we have time to do them in a 5-year period, but they have to be ordered. And in my experience, I mean, I'm a research and design engineer, and I have, often several times taken 2, 3, 5 years even to develop a system to the point where it's sort of operational and can and has its first full version. So long-term planning is important, and yet what we want to do is really ideally have a continual release cycle where things get incrementally better, month by month. And so that requires taking this cloud of ideas and creative ideas and then intentionally ordering them into in an order that allows us to have this continually useful improvement and still travel to the destination and not do what you would call a random walk. So, cat in the wild. Cat in the wild. All right. Cheers.